moment. There we go. Essentially the key elements we wanted, the grant ranges, we did make a slight change. We've made the minimum grant now 75,000. The maximum grant request we are keeping at 500,000. As we did last year, we will entertain applications over 500,000, up to $1 million. We will talk a little bit about, though, however, there's some additional requirements for those requesting larger grants. Total funds available. At the moment, as you all may know, there's the legislature has completed the budget. They're going through the process. We're trying to finalize all of our numbers. At the moment, the RFP has published. We have published in the RFP, we have the 1.6 million available. That represents the amount of money that was not allocated in the last round. So we know we are starting the year with that. We do anticipate fully having additional $15 million available and so that we will have that confirmation as we get closer to the deadline for the application. So in total, we do expect to have about 16.6 actually available. But at the time we had to publish the RFP, we were required to put here subject to appropriation because it was still a moving target. Let's see, grant use. As I've mentioned, these are general operating grants. You can certainly include overhead costs, personnel costs, supplies, materials, meeting expenses, things like that. And again, we'll go over that in the budget section. And wanted to note again that capital expenses are not eligible. Again, as an operating grant and in the operating budget, we are still subject to a performance period that has to end on June 30th of 2023. As such, we have published the RFP a little sooner or a little earlier this year with the intent of being able to make awards and fully contract before the end of the calendar year so that all the projects have the full 6 months or more. The earlier you get your contract in, the earlier we can get started, your project can get started. But until further notice, until we get any further guidance from the legislature about any future PAC or anything to roll over, we are operating on the reality at the moment that these are groups that need to end by June 30th of 2023, which is the end of the fiscal year. Eligible communities. This RFP is open to any Massachusetts city or town or neighborhood. And we're looking for those communities that meet the criteria of the line item. And so being disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system, et cetera. And there is an opportunity in the application to highlight and demonstrate that your community meet those criteria. Great. And the next slide, we will, let's see, so the eligible, similar to last year, we are looking for the lead applicant. We do need to have one kind of lead applicant for that community group or community association. And generally speaking, that'll be a nonprofit community-based organization. We can also accept an application from a municipal government, kind of applying on behalf of the group. That's really a decision locally to be made on who the group would like to have as their lead applicant. We do ask that the lead applicant have the capacity to be able to contract with the well, has the ability to kind of manage the grant and be able to distribute any sub grants, et cetera. The lead applicant is the one responsible for all of the reporting and submission of all timely items up to HED. So you'd want to kind of select an organization that is prepared and large enough to be able to handle the management of the grant for the whole group. And then in terms of who you can partner with, really this is it's wide open. It's really, we're looking to you at the local level to determine, once you've defined for us kind of what is the issue that you're trying to resolve or the goal that you're trying to meet, it's really bringing together who are the key and strategic partners that you need to be able to accomplish those goals. So whether it's, other communalizations, it could be the school department, it could be you could partner with the chamber. The broader and more diverse that partnership is, I will say, the better the application will do in terms of scoring. And again, we do expect, particularly if you're working in, in a community, that you are in conversations and working in partnership with the municipality as well. And so that's, part of the group, having partnerships, again, with the nonprofits, the business community, and the government. In terms of acquisition method and contract, these are cost reimbursement contracts. I'll reiterate what we've said in several of the webinars from last year. In consideration that we are asking you to run a program kind of in a 6-month period, and understanding that for a lot of the groups, it may be difficult to be able to get started without some funds. We have decided that we will, again, distribute 50% of the grant at the time of the contract signing, so that project can hit the ground running right away. And we will again be offering, expecting the first quarterly report. If you've spent X amount by that point, we will issue an additional allotment of the grant. And then the remaining funds, however, the final payment will happen after the close of the project, after you submit your final report and it is submitted and approved. Then we will disperse the remaining funds from the grant. Great. And let's see, this is so the key dates for the RFP. As you know, the RFP was published on August 1st. We're holding this webinar today for information purposes. As Ali mentioned, we will be posting an FAQ to assist the grantees as well as you prepare to write your proposals. The application deadline is Wednesday, September 14th at 5 p.m. We will talk through the elements of how to prepare your application in a moment. We anticipate then going into the evaluation and review period, having our recommendations sent up to the secretary and others for final approvals, and be in a position to make a notification of the awards or decisions on all the applications in November. And so at that point, we will immediately pivot to contracting in order to get all the projects up and running. And then we will able to have your contract and project start in January. And then finally, for my part here, I just wanted to do an overview of the review criteria, which is outlined in the RFP, but we wanted to really highlight to be very mindful of the way we're organized the application, the way we're asking the questions, as that is exactly how all the reviewers will go through the application and score them. And so again, we'll look for projects that have established partnerships, coalitions, collaborations. The more that you have a track record of working together, that's going to strengthen your application. And we are asking organizations within the same neighborhoods or those communities to collaborate and put together joint proposals in order to maximize your impact. The applications will be evaluated and scored on a 110-point scale, and in the items that are noted here. We will again go through the questions more specifically to help understand how these will all be evaluated. And I wanted to mention that the advancing equitable opportunities is a bonus element. The extent to which the applicant is able to demonstrate adherence or carrying out specific recommendations from those commissions, that'll strengthen the application as well. So with that, I think I'm passing it to Ali to walk us through the application highlights.
Thanks so much, Juan. And I did just have a little technical glitch here where my laptop shut off on me. So if that happens again, I'm sure Juan can pick up that ball and run with it. But just some warning that might happen. All right, folks. So as Juan mentioned, the application deadline is 5 o'clock on Wednesday, September 14th. Submittable is a platform that we are using for these applications. If you already saw the application linked on the mass.gov page, you'll see that it is in Submittable. The components of the application are the cover page, the proposal narrative, the budget form, which you need to download, fill out, and then upload back into the form. And if your application is for more than $500,000, there's additional verifications that you will need to complete, and those we'll walk through those real quick. Next slide, please. Okay, so the cover page is the basics. The project, city, and town. I see we're already getting some questions on this subject. We strongly prefer applications that are located and take place in this projects that take place in a single city or town or neighborhood. So we'll ask you to specify that first. We understand in certain circumstances that it makes sense for a regional application to be submitted. And by regional, I really mean in adjacent cities and towns. So cities and towns that share a border and share other factors in common, not just their geographic proximity. So when we get further into the application, we'll talk more about things like the target population that you're serving. And you would want those to be the same across the geographic borders if you were to submit a regional application. We do ask you to specify each of the cities and towns that you would want your project to take place in, and then the basic lead application information, address, project contacts, leadership, certifications, etc. So that's all on the form and pretty straightforward. Next slide, please. Okay. Then we'll ask for a summary of the grant proposal, how much money you're requesting, the total project budget, an abstract, and to select the category that best represents the focus of the project. These are kind of the categories that were set forth in the foundational language of the program, and select the one that best fits the work that you would like to do. The proposal narrative, these are long form questions. They range from 250 to 500 word limits. They're all visible. The word limits are all visible on the application itself, so it won't be a surprise. We're asking you to describe the neighborhood economic and social context that this project takes place in, or what issues or circumstances led to it, and what the project strives to achieve for the whole community it takes place in. Here, we're really getting to the essence of like, how connected are you to this community? How much is your organization, your coalition part of this community, and knowledgeable about the various factors that interplay that led to this taking place. Then community collaboration and partnerships. We really want to know all the members of your partnership or coalition. This is a key component of this grant program. And so you really want to make sure to include the folks who you're working with specificity, right? So names of organizations, names of people, listing just like, oh, we're going to find a partner who does X is not going to be scored as competitively as actually knowing who your partners are and having a relationship with them. And telling us about what makes this group innovative or effective to do this work. You know, why is this a project that should be funded for its efficacy, for its innovation, for its unique ability to fill a need in your community. And then we also ask if you have other partners who aren't necessarily part of your partnership or coalition that are providing, or partners that are as well, but are providing financial coordination or staff support, provide those as well. Thanks. the target population. This is your time to shine. We, again, really want to see that you know the folks who you're serving, because this is a short window, right? This is a short grant period. It's important that you be able to be as effective as possible in 6 short months, and already knowing the specific group of folks who you plan to serve is part of that. So we want to know about the particular groups, if they've been socially and or economically disadvantaged and or historically represented, and providing us as much specific information as you can with data about the membership of the groups, and what particular challenges they have experienced, right? Because different communities have faced different challenges over time, and we don't assume that we necessarily know the particular challenges of one group. Really make it as plain as you can. Describing the poverty levels in the target project community and the extent to which they fall below 250% of the federal poverty level. Here, we're asking you to use US Census data, comparing the community's median household income to the federal poverty level for a family of 3. You may have additional data to provide, which you're certainly welcome to, but we are using this as kind of a cornerstone here. And then describing the extent to which the target community is disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system and provide relevant statistics. I saw and am seeing a lot of questions about this in the chat and the Q&A there in terms of like a data source. We have data that we'll be using as part of this evaluation process from the Department of Corrections. Feel free to kind of think about how you can measure that in your own community. Like, what is the impact of the criminal justice system? Is it have to do with folks who are incarcerated, or is it something more nuanced, like looking to the amount of people who are out of the workforce because they're incarcerated, or thinking about the effect of quarries on people's ability to find employment. So there isn't a monolithic data source that I will point you to in this case. And I'll answer this in the written FAQ as well, and see what resources I can offer you. But I think thinking about incarceration and arrest and court involvement are all aspects of sort of a continuum of the criminal justice system. So think about all of that when you're answering that question. I'm going to pause just for a second, because I see the FAQ is okay. All right, the Q&A. We'll return to the Q&A. Okay, so thanks very much. Next slide. Okay, impact of your project and your project plan. What outcomes does this project hope to achieve for the target population? So earlier in the application, we asked you about what this will achieve for the community as a whole. Here, we're asking about the target population. So giving outcomes related to prevention of justice system involvement, successful reentry, other activities relevant to the program's objectives. That could be recovery housing, that could be employment engagement, other things. And again, you want to look to the nexus with justice system involvement and the work that you're doing. Okay, what roles did members of the target population play in identifying these opportunities? Again, this is a community-led effort, right? So it's coming from the community. Hopefully you have folks in your target population who are also shaping the project and playing an active role in representing the needs of the target population. So we want to hear about that, and sort of the nothing about us without us, right? So we want to make sure that folks are being heard in their communities about what they need specifically, and not being told what they need in sort of a top-down way. Then list specific services and outcomes of this project, include description of participants, intervention type, and expected results. And on the submittable, that one I believe is a table, so that should be pretty straightforward. Track record, we're asking you about implementing your similar projects, if you've done it before, if you've been working in community collaborations and partnerships historically, we want to hear about that. And describing your partnerships history. Have you passed legislation in the past? Have you helped create a a network for food access? Whatever you've done, we want to know that you and your partners have worked together successfully, because we know that more is going to get done if you have a successful partnership. And you're going to be able to sustain the work over the long term. Okay, capacity to succeed. Project timeline, we want to know what you're going to do each month. There's only 6 months. So that is a pretty, one step at a time here, month by month description of what you're doing. And then the budget form, you'll download it from the mass.gov page, you'll complete it, and you'll upload it back into Submittable. And we'll ask you to describe any matching funds that you have, which are not required, but are always great. Okay, so advancement of equitable opportunities. This is, as Juan described already, this is the opportunity for you to discuss how your project aligns with the Latino Advisory Commission and Black Advisory Commission recommendations, or your opportunity to discuss how this in other ways advances equity goals. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is application extension for applications over $500,000. We're asking for specific information to show us that you have the capacity to handle a grant of this size in this short time period. I think it's pretty straightforward. If you have questions, you can ask them in the chat, or you can email us at eoattgrant@mass.gov. Again, the concern is demonstrating capacity to handle this. Next slide, please. Here's the budget form. You can look at it on the mass.gov page. Pretty straightforward. It's an Excel sheet. There are sample lines. Please write over them so that they don't end up in your grant total. Next slide, please. And again, more budget form. Next slide. And other optional attachments. You may attach other letters of support from your municipality, from your partners. These won't be scored, but you may attach them if you wish. Continue. All right, here we are at the FAQ. I think I'm gonna share these. So I'm gonna kick it off here. Folks ask, is my type of organization eligible to be the lead applicant? If you are a municipality or a nonprofit organization, you are eligible to be the lead applicant. Any type of organization can be part of the coalition, but only nonprofits and government agencies are eligible to be the lead applicants. So if you're a for-profit organization, you certainly can be part of a coalition, but you cannot be the lead. All right. Juan, when do the grant funds need to be expended?
Sure. So as we've mentioned, at the moment we're operating, this is an operating budget line item, and as such, it has a kind of date certain. We're only able to reimburse or provide funding for expenditures that happen through June 30th of 2023. Similar to this year, you'll be able to send us the final report and bill in July next year, but we're only able to count expenditures that happened by June, no later than June 30th 2023.
Thank you. Another question we get a lot is, I think another city could benefit from the work my organization does in our city. Can my project be expanding my organization's reach into a new location? And we, as I sort of addressed this before, this is not, I would say, not an ideal situation. There may be circumstances in which one organization's work is brought to another community, but I would say if you are considering a project like that, you would want to be absolutely sure that you have a strong demand from the community you're going into, and a strong coalition in that community that wants this expansion. So you wouldn't want to be just applying to bring your organization to another city without having strong ties to the first or to the new city. You would want them to be asking you to come there and for them to be part of the application.
I would add to that. I mean, I think because we get this question a lot in each year. You know, again, the intent of the legislature when they put together this project, and it's very specifically laid out in the line item. You know, the idea here, I'm going to pick a hypothetical community called Mayfield. The idea is that if Mayfield is a community that has, unfortunately, has had a disproportionate impact by the criminal justice system. A lot of young people have been incarcerated. There's been high crime, high police, et cetera. That's the target, right? And the idea here is for organizations, particularly established organizations, bringing together partners to bring positive outcomes to those people in that community. It's not about whether your organization is great and you want to do things in everybody's community. It's about what is this group going to do to improve the lives of people in that neighborhood. And an example we have, in other other programs, for example, the communities that had the casinos. There's a huge economic engine coming to those communities. There were groups of people that joined together to figure out how to get people, trained, workforce, help them build resumes, et cetera, so that they can get those jobs. Otherwise, they were not going to be able to take advantage of the economic windfall in those communities. And so it's really thinking about what is the issue. Once you've identified Mayfield and you understand that Mayfield has unfortunately been negatively impacted in the past, what project are you going to bring to Mayfield to help the residents of Mayfield get better economic outcomes or other outcomes as outlined in the RFP? But that's really the focus you need to have. It's not about your organization's great or not great, or you have aspirations to be statewide. That's great, but that's not what this grant program is for. This grant program is to provide you resources to bring to bear something significant for that community, for that neighborhood, for those residents who have otherwise have had to deal with the negative impacts of the criminal justice system and have been behind in economic outcomes or have not been able to take advantage. Big cities like Springfield, Worcester, there's a lot in Boston, a lot of economic activity, hotel, new office buildings. Our members of the community in particular neighborhoods, have they been able to access those resources, access those, those assets and being able to get into those things? If not, then what can your project do to advance the outcomes for those members of the community? That's where the focus needs to be. And so I think when you ask yourself that question, the answer is no, you're not to go out and expand your empire. This is about you coming and providing direct impact and helping people that have otherwise suffered, these adverse impacts because of where they are, because of where they're located, because of their income status, et cetera. That's where you need to be putting your attention. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Juan, for putting that much more transparently than I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we we've answered sort of all of these questions here. So I am going to move on to the questions that are in the Q&A. I'm going to go in the order that I received them. If you sent a question before 10:13, before I got kicked out, I have lost it. So please resend it if it hasn't been answered. Again, we're going to go roughly in the order they were received.
I can see them. I can see the ones before. Yeah, so I'll keep an eye on those. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, we'll go roughly in this order. If we don't get to your question, we have received it, and we will be aggregating questions and posting them on the FAQ, which will probably be up at the end of this week. And we'll send out an email when the FAQ is prepared. If you have a specific question about your project or program, email us to eohedgrants@mass.gov, and we can spend a little bit more time on it than we can here. Okay, so it's 10:40. We have about 20 minutes for questions here. So let's get right into it. The first one I see here is from Stephanie. She asks, does our organization have to serve incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people, or just any people who live in a community that is disproportionately affected by the criminal justice system? So the answer to that one is that you don't have to exclusively serve incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people. We do ask that there is some link to the impact of the criminal justice system, but it could be something like helping folks, keeping folks from dropping out. It could be helping invigorate a economic center that was impacted by a community that has had a lot of court involvement. So no, you don't per se have to serve incarcerated people, but you want to think about that nexus between the criminal justice system and the community and how your project addresses those impacts.
Ali, there are a few from before. Let me try to see if I can grab a few of those. Yeah, so the first question we got, which probably is on the mind of a lot of folks on this call. So how does the FY23 round of this program align with the FY22 reporting? And I think we've outlined this in a webinar that where we've talked to all of the current grantees. Essentially the high level of it is if the top priority will be given to projects that finished up on June 30th and file their final reports by June 30th. Projects that did request an extension, but will be completing their project by September 30th. Will kind of be neutral. You'll be able to apply. And as long as you finish by September 30th, by the time we're actually looking at your new application and scoring it, if your project's already completed, the previous project's completed, that should be fine. However, anybody that is still has the project open past September and intends to finish up in December, you can still apply, but please note that it will be deprioritized. There will be a challenge if you haven't finished the project to consider the second project. In none of those cases are we saying you cannot apply at all. Just be mindful that if you haven't finished your project and we're reading your new application, and we also know that you haven't finished the first project, your application is essentially going to be scored lower. But anybody can apply. There's a good resource. So I want to add this issue of the data, right? And the criminal justice data, incarceration, anecdotal, and Ali can probably add to this as well. I would say, as Ali mentioned, we have some basic data from the Department of Corrections that'll help us just establish almost on a binary level, right? Does this neighborhood or this community have high level of incarcerations versus other communities? And that'll be one of the comparisons that we'll make. We also have federal poverty data, right? So we'll be able to establish whether in fact those neighborhoods are meeting those federal poverty levels. So at a basic level, we'll make some determinations there. So we're not looking for you to necessarily provide that binary data. Of course, you can provide it if you have it. I think the questions are really looking to how well do you understand that population and the problem? How well do you understand the levels of incarceration in that neighborhood and how is it impacting the quality of life of people in that neighborhood. Really, it's that qualitative part, right, that we're not going to get from the statistics. We're just going to see a statistic that says, yes, it's high poverty or not high poverty. However, we expect the applicants, however, to provide as a way to, to demonstrate the need, a much more qualitative. So I would say, don't worry about necessarily hitting the right data numbers, right, as far as the exact number of incarcerations or the exact poverty level, as much as worry about explaining that it is high and how you understand that. What impact do you understand that to have? Would you add anything to that, or would you say?
Yeah, that's a great summary. Thank you.
Okay. And then another question is just, what do we mean by general operating grants? Essentially, it's just, I would say, anything not capital. So if it's a major capital purchase, it's not eligible. Otherwise, personnel, we mean, the cost of personnel to run the project, the cost of, meeting expenses, supplies and materials. If you're running an after-school youth program that is trying to do coding, the purchase of laptops and, notebooks and things like that, right, are just materials that you need for the program. Or if you're, things like that. And also, like I said, meeting expenses, supplies and materials, the cost of the sub-grantees. We do expect the partnerships to have kind of the budget for the lead applicant to cover the expenses that they have to kind of lead the project. But we also expect to see amounts of money that are going to be sub-granted to your partners. You could also have money spent on consultants that you may need that are specific to a particular thing you're trying to do. And so, and as well as overhead, right? So we do understand that there are indirect expenses and overhead to this. We ask you to keep it reasonable, and that can be included as well. But anything that is capital, large expenditures, purchasing large equipment, vehicles, real estate, things like that are not eligible. Anything else is, and then let's see, statistics already, yeah. And then applications from more than one municipality. I think as we've addressed, particularly in the smaller neighborhoods, we do notice if we had like 3 applications from a small town, from a small city, all trying to do workforce development, and then clearly haven't talked to each other. That, I would say, does not reflect well on the readers. When we're reading these applications, we notice these things. So we would just say to you, be strategic. If you're in a large community, of course, there's going to be neighborhood projects that have different partnerships, but be mindful. Unlike Urban Agenda, we are not restricting this to just one application per city. There can be more than one application per city, but again, we're going to be looking at who's your partnership, what neighborhoods are you focused on, and are you actually collaborating with other groups that are in that neighborhood. And so that I would be mindful more about that we don't get more than one application from the same neighborhood doing the same project. That's really what you want to kind of avoid. But otherwise, it's perfectly fine if you have one group in the community trying to do a dropout prevention project to keep young people out of the criminal justice system. And then on the other side of town, you have a group that's working on helping minority-owned businesses be able to, recover and improve and be able to hire more people. Some, 2 different types of projects, let's say. And I think that those are all the primary ones that before.
That's great. Thank you.
13,
yeah. I think we've made some good headway into some of the existing ones. So one question that we're seeing a lot is, does a lead organization need to be a nonprofit? You must be a nonprofit, an existing nonprofit, like registered. If have nonprofit status with the IRS and with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So you can't apply and then get nonprofit status later, or you can be a municipality or government organization. So those are the options for the lead applicant. Also, a bunch of folks asking if you can use a fiscal sponsor. You can use a fiscal sponsor, but your organization has to be capable of meeting those criteria that I just discussed and accepting the funds on your own behalf and then working with a fiscal sponsor. So we won't be accepting applications from fiscal sponsors, and we won't be dispersing funds to fiscal sponsors.
Yeah, it's important. We want to kind of double underline on this to avoid the confusion. So the answer is no, a fiscal sponsor cannot be the applicant, the lead applicant, under no circumstances. You, the nonprofit organization, has to be an existing organization. You have to apply on behalf of the group, or whoever the lead agency, whoever the lead applicant is, has to be able to execute a contract with the Commonwealth. We will disperse the funds to that nonprofit. Now, if the nonprofit normally uses a fiscal sponsor to manage their budget or their finances or their payroll, things like that, you're welcome to continue doing that if that's how you operate. But this application to us and the grant and the contract will be to you, the nonprofit, only. We will not contract with the fiscal sponsor. We will not, or entertain any applications from the fiscal sponsor. The lead applicant needs to be an organization that is established and is able to contract with the Commonwealth. And then, like I said, if you normally use, however you manage your grant after you receive it is fine, but the applicant and the recipient of the funds from HED has to be a nonprofit organization or a municipal.
Thanks, Juan. That's great. I think we already addressed the question about current grantees and preference. Moving on a little bit here. We have a few questions at the start, like, is this to support new or existing projects or programs? And the answer is both, any of the above. Okay, just looking through these for a second here. Will we be giving consideration for partial funding? Juan, do you want to answer that one?
Yes, and I think the question is, given this, is that the one that says given the smaller funding level?
Yes.
For FY23, yeah. So at this point, right, we have, we fully anticipate having 15.6 million, 16.6 million available, which, we were able to award a little bit more than that last year. But we will, yes, the answer is yes, we will consider making partial awards to really strong projects if needed, in order to accommodate, part of our consideration also is geographic distribution. So in order to ensure that resources are distributed across the Commonwealth in different parts of the state, in different types of cities, et cetera. So yes, the answer is yes, we will, that decision gets made at the end if we need to. After we score and know what the top projects are, if needed, we will consider making partial awards to accommodate more projects. Yes.
Okay. I see someone named Nick has repeatedly asked if there are any age limits, and I'm not sure I understand that question. But I guess no. I mean, no, the lead applicant must be an organization though, not a person. So yeah, if you have further follow-up on that question, you can email us at eoatdgrants@mass.gov.
Yeah, and as far as participants, right, you could be working with young people, any ages, right, K through 12 students. You could work with elderly, you can work with adult, whatever. There's no age limits to who you can serve. Yeah.
Great point. Thanks, Lauren. That's another interpretation. Question about what if my community is disproportionately impacted by the housing court system? This program was specifically funded for communities impacted by the criminal justice system. I think there's a good chance there's an amount of overlap there, but the funding for this program was created for communities impacted by the criminal court system. Question for you, Juan, do you have any caps or limits on the percentage of funds that can be used for administration?
Sure. We don't have a hard and fast. I think, again, we just say keep it reasonable. Generally speaking, I think people, those that did include overhead last year were in the 10 to 15% range that we consider reasonable. I think if you're going to be higher, we're going to need an explanation. So it's not, so there is no specific limit or cap necessarily, but we do, we do anticipate that, we will approve overhead rates for sure. We understand that that's an important component of being able to run these programs, especially the lead applicant needing to manage sub-grantees. So we just have to keep it reasonable. I think it's the 15% range. That is, especially if you have an established indirect rate that you normally use in your budgeting, that should be what you apply. We've had cases where folks have a federally negotiated indirect rate, which is much higher in most cases. We're not bound by that higher number. We do still expect you to keep it at the 10 to 15 range.
Thanks, Juan. Looking through these questions, the questions asking for organizations who are part of the grant in the first round, can we summarize what is different this time around? I'm happy to kick it off if that's helpful. Yeah. There's a few changes, I think not significant in terms of content or the goals of the program, largely administrative. The minimum grant size has been increased from 50,000 to 75,000. We have created new verification processes for grants over $500,000. We have been trying to offer more clarity about what an operating grant is, because I know there's been a lot of questions about that. We have, last time we did accept applications from fiscal agents, which we are not doing this year. And we have slightly different funding amounts available than we did last time. Last time we had $22 million available because it was several years of funding compounded into one, and this year is not. I think that is pretty much all of the changes. I don't know if there's anything one that you can think of that I'm leaving out, but that's the highlight reel.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
I see a question about matching funds. And so I think, whether they can be in kind. I think generally speaking, what you'll find in the new budget table, correct me, Ali, if I'm wrong, is we're primarily asking you to outline the total requested amount and the breakdown. In the narrative, we'll ask you to describe for us what the match, if you have a match, what is it, right? We're not asking for the match in the budget table this year. Is that correct?
Correct. That is no longer part of the budget table.
Yeah.
It is now a question below that you can provide that information.
Yeah. However, so it'll be in narrative form. You'll describe for us what other, if you have other grants, et cetera. But to the question about in-kind, it's cash matches is really what we're looking for, the direct dollar-to-dollar cash match to the project. You can describe what in-kind things are being contributed to the project, but those are not going to have the same weight. It's really the cash match that helps us understand the grant that we'd be providing. Is it leveraging other resources to be able to give the group more capacity?
I'm going to summarize two questions into one where because we're at the very end here. Folks are asking if we're going to share the list of participants. No, I don't think we're going to share the list of participants. You can see the list of previous grantees. This question is coming up a lot. The list of previous grantees is available on mass.gov. and I will put it in the FAQ as well so that everybody can see the previous grantees. You can also Google it, but I don't have it on hand, or I would share it with you right here. If you want to see the list of the projects from last year, and that hopefully will also answer people's questions about an example of a project, since the press release does have summaries of all of those projects. It is 11 o'clock now, we're reaching end. We will be posting the FAQ. If you have a very specific question about your project or program, you can email us at eohtdgrants@mass.gov. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your interest in this program. And I'll hand it over to Juan if you have anything else you want to say before we wrap up here.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate everybody's participation. Lots of great questions. I don't think we didn't anticipate and didn't have enough time to go through all of them. We will be reviewing all of these and including them in an FAQ document offsite. But thank you all for the questions. A lot of really thoughtful questions here as you have gone through the RFP and have tried to understand what we're looking for. So no, thank you again to everybody, and we look forward to reading your projects, about your projects.
Thanks very much, everyone. Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll post the recording shortly.
Yeah, we'll stop the recording and then we'll